And guess what? We managed to get her back in for a second week in a row. Dr. Anu Martins, and it's not just because of your surname. It's not.
Yes, people will think that, isn't it?
But yes, it's such a pleasure to have you back on the show. And so Dr. Anu Martins came in last week, and because of her, we're actually streaming. We are going to be doing that from here on out. We're streaming live up on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos, and you can come go watch the replay after this because this is going to be a very interesting conversation. All right, so Dr. Anu, thank you very much for joining me and for spearheading this conversation that we're about to have because Tuesday, 2nd of May 2023 was World Asthma Day, and it's come on. Here we are 2 days later. Why are we not going to talk about asthma and also living with asthma? Because there are a number of people who are living with asthma. You know, asthma is I I think it's gotten a bit of a Hollywood makeover in the comedy role. In that, asthma always seems to be related to the nerds in the films. Like, if you want to
Yeah.
show someone is a nerd, just show them with an inhaler. And
Yes, and
that is that.
glasses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Glasses and an inhaler, and then you're good to go. That's your nerd. But
Yeah.
that's not asthma.
No, not at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we decided let's have this conversation around living with asthma, the how people can manage symptoms, make sure that the environment is helpful for them, and treatments, of course, for asthma as well. All right. So, Dr. Anu, first things first. Oh, by the way, everybody, make sure you join this conversation and just give her a warm welcome and a warm thank you because I sent her a bunch of questions. I was like, oh, okay then.
Like she
Great
sent me
question.
seminar questions. I'm like, are we having a conference? Oh my God.
Great questions to wake up to
Well,
in the
thanks for having me
morning.
back. It's great to be here. Conversing with you is always very interesting. Very. So let's go, right?
Yep, let's go. So first things first, we always start with the basics.
Yeah.
And so just can you break it down for us? Give us a brief overview of asthma and its prevalence in today's society.
Mm, yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Shokwe. Great topic. Very important to talk about asthma. Apart from the Hollywood makeover, it's not. I don't think it's something that's really, up front and center. And
Mm-mm.
yet, it's something that's very important because it's a disease of the lungs. It's one of the two most important lung conditions, second only to COPD, that's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a whole different topic
Mm.
entirely. Another reason why asthma is such an important topic is also because it mostly starts in childhood. And it's a chronic condition, meaning that it usually lasts a lifetime.
Mm.
Um, so, um, so just a basic overview of asthma. Asthma is a disease that affects the lungs. And what happens in asthma is that there's difficulty in breathing, if you want to put it at the very basics. That difficulty in breathing has other symptoms. It has certain triggers, it has certain causes, the different types of the disease. Um, so let's see. You have asthma. Asthma usually starts in childhood. It's usually the most common and the one that most people are aware of is what we call allergic asthma, where there are certain triggers that a person would breathe in,
Mm.
and then it would trigger a response in the person's airway.
Is it kind of like if they've got hay fever and they breathe in pollen and
So hay
then?
fever is
Mm.
allergic rhinitis. So it's a similar response on the cellular level. It's a similar response that the body gives, but it's limited to the upper airway.
Okay.
But in asthma, it comes all the way down to the lungs. So what happens is somebody could breathe in an allergen, something they react to, dust mites, pollen, for example,
Okay.
and the body then creates a response that attacks those particles as though they're very dangerous. So they're normally occurring particles, but the body responds as though they're extremely dangerous. And then to limit the body's exposure, what the lungs then do is that the bronchioles, which are the smaller airways within the lungs, begin to constrict to reduce the input of those particulate matter.
Okay.
Then there are other things that happen. I don't want to get too technical. The other things that happen, one of the other responses is that the body also produces excessive fluid to help flush it out. And so the
Oh, so that is that what leads to all the
to all
coughing?
the phlegm, yes. So it leads to
Okay,
the phlegm. So the phlegm builds up, and the body's way of getting rid of the phlegm
is to
is to
cough
cough
it
it
out.
out. So then you
Gotcha.
have those symptoms. So you have the difficulty in breathing because there's a tightening of the
Mm.
airways. Then you have the increase in secretions. So you have the bands, the tight chest feeling, or the pain in the chest, and then you have the coughing where the body is trying to get rid of the excessive buildup of matter within the lungs. So those are the basic symptoms that you have of asthma, and that's why that's the impression that we all have of asthma is difficulty in breathing. The person
Mm.
is wheezing. The sound that is made when someone has an asthmatic attack or is having asthmatic symptoms is called a wheeze. It's not like the regular sound. It sounds like a whistling sound. Mostly, the sound comes through when the person is breathing out, but you can also hear when the person is breathing in. So that's asthma in a nutshell. Um,
That sounds serious.
it is.
See, I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just me, but sometimes
Yeah.
when people, so when I conjure up asthma, I have to remember that okay, step away from the instinctive feeling, which is oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that serious because it's a term that, is everybody knows. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows asthma, unlike
Yeah.
COPD, where people are
Yeah,
like,
like
oh,
what's
that
that?
sounds serious, but
Yeah.
both are serious in different ways.
Yeah.
One is just more well known,
Yes, than the
and
other.
perhaps familiarity breeds contempt.
I think so. So to give the stats, right?
Mm.
Like we gave the other day about malaria. So for the stats on asthma worldwide, WHO figures tell us that we have 262 million people that are affected by asthma. That's both children and adults, and that's a global figure. Now, the Nigerian figures, the last figure that we have are from a team of Nigerian researchers. That's from 2019, and at that time, the figures were 13 million Nigerians.
Wow,
That's a lot
that
of
is a
people.
lot of people.
Yes. So it's something that actually does need to be addressed. We need more awareness. And then if we go into talking about triggers and what have you, you find that we're having lots of triggers in this environment.
So now you've already talked about breathing in, no, yeah, apart from pollutants, breathing in, what was the word?
Particulate matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and how that can trigger a response. What other triggers are there?
So, okay, let's start with so there's pollen, which is the most researched, I think. Pollen is released by plants, and that's how plants and flowers. That's how they send out their seed and they can reproduce and what have you.
Mm.
And they're really tiny, so they can be inhaled. So that's one major. Also, grass also produces pollen. That's why if you have if you know people that went to boarding house and they're cutting grass, there's some people that would then have that reaction to it. It's
Mm.
because of that exposure. Um, then other common examples of allergens are animal fur.
Ah,
So
okay,
if you want to
yes.
be fancy, we talk about people that are allergic to dogs and to cats.
The dander, right?
Yes, the animal dander. But
Mm.
guess what? In this environment, in terms of animal dander that a lot of people are exposed to,
Goats?
no,
What?
rats.
Oh,
It's rats.
okay.
It's rats. It's
Okay.
really gross. And they're everywhere.
Mhm.
Whether you know it or not, especially very very common. So that's something that people are exposed to and that can that can trigger asthmatic symptoms or attacks.
Wow. Good to
Let
know.
me
Good
tell
to
you,
know.
yes. And so let's move on to another creature, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
that also triggers.
No
So,
cockroaches.
cockroaches. How did
Oh,
you know?
oh. Because it's my worst nightmare. Why not?
Yeah, so when you check the research from the West talk about dust mites. I'm like, do we have dust mites in Nigeria? We have cockroaches.
Oh,
Yeah, so
okay.
it's another what we call it, another feather to their
To
amazing,
their cap.
disgusting cap. So yeah, so those are some of the triggers. So their smell, their body parts can get
Oh.
so tiny,
Mm.
and people, those that are prone to asthmatic attacks or allergic reactions can then respond negatively to that.
Oh wow, I remain both enlightened and disgusted every time on Smooth Health. Wow,
So maybe
biology.
maybe we should move on to the less disgusting stuff.
Perhaps.
So
By the
things
way,
like smoke,
okay.
right? Almost
Oh
any kind of
wow.
smoke, yeah.
Yeah, and
So
we have a lot of smoke, burning tires,
yes,
buildings, and so on and so forth.
yes, and then cigarette smoke for those that smoke or
Mm.
exposed to that. Then cooking, the smoke from cooking.
Yes.
The worst kind of smoke is firewood smoke
Mm.
because you can even see the particulate matter as it's coming out.
Hmm.
So open fire, open wood smoke also can trigger
We have a
asthma.
lot of that.
We have a lot of that. Another kind of smoke that people forget about is smoke from machines. So you think manufacturing companies and what have you, but guess what is very common in this environment?
Car exhaust fumes.
Car exhaust and generators.
Oh, generators. Oh, I forgot about that one. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, that's. Oh, we're dealing
It's
with a lot
terrible.
here.
Yep.
So, how are people with asthma managing in Nigeria? And when you have the triggers, in fact, you know what? We have to go on a break. Um, we have to go on a quick break. But what will happen is that on the other side of the break, we're gonna have to talk about how people then,
Mm-hmm.
once they have a trigger, once they
Mm-hmm.
have an attack, how they can, well, first of all, actually, how to stave off attacks,
Mm-hmm.
and then if an attack does occur, what
What
can
to
be
do?
done?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So we'll do all of that after the break right here on Smooth Health.
Smooth Health on the Drive.
Is this
Wow,
are we still streaming
cockroaches.
even though we're
Smooth
on a break?
Health
Yes,
on the
we are.
Drive.
Give
I
me
hate
one.
cockroaches and they
I
stink.
dislike cockroaches. I dislike cockroaches so much. This has been a hmm.
So we're talking about the what to do, right?
Yes.
Which of those questions is it? Like a billion questions. Goodness
We,
me.
like I said, we will probably not get through all
Yeah,
of
you
them,
know.
but it's good to. Okay.
And your face is so expressive. Like when you said there's only cockroaches. Your face was like, "Ew."
Oh, I hate cockroaches. I hate cockroaches
I
with
hate
a
them.
passion.
Mm,
Really do not like cockroaches.
yeah.
All right, we will be back in 30.
I was looking for the question. Hey. What was the question again? Hey.
Give me 1 second. I've got my questions here. So, we've talked about primary causes and triggers of asthma, air pollution and climate change impact the prevalence and severity of asthma. We can do that
Mm,
quickly.
okay.
But also, common symptoms of asthma, how individuals can recognize them, I think is also key.
Okay, what number is that, please?
That is number 4.
Number four. Okay, cool.
Okay. Smooth 98.1. This is Smooth Health on Smooth Drive with Shopper Martins. I have got Dr. Anu Martins, who's a health management consultant, in the studio with me. We are streaming live up on youtube.com/, smooth 981 FM Lagos. And we're taking your comments and your messages via WhatsApp on 0809 440 981. You can also go over to Twitter, use the hashtag Smooth Health 981 to get your questions, your worries, your concerns, and your observations in the conversation. All right, so Dr. Anu, we've been talking so far about a brief overview of asthma, how what kind of numbers we have here in Nigeria, the primary causes and triggers, and
Mm-hmm.
I asked what people can do before the break. I asked what people can do to stave off an asthma attack. If they do
Yeah.
have asthma, what can be done to kind of mitigate it, and um, but if an asthma attack does occur, then what can be done to lessen the effects?
Yeah. Okay, so great question. So, what can people do to mitigate? So, the first and most important thing is we have what we call an asthma action plan.
Okay.
So, let's take it from the beginning. So, let's say somebody has a child who has had difficulty breathing, has issues, and then they see a doctor. They're consulted with a doctor, and the child has been um, examined, and they're like, okay, the person has asthma. So the very first thing is to know the kind of asthma that the child has. Most likely to be allergic asthma. And so if the person has allergic asthma, the most important thing is to know what allergens that child or that person reacts to.
Okay.
So over a period of time, they would need to observe the child. We talked about the triggers earlier and some of the allergens.
Mm.
How does a person react during rainy season, during the dry season, at least in this environment?
Because you've talked about dust, and the first
Yeah,
thing that came to mind was Hamatan.
yeah. So Dust in itself doesn't necessarily, because if it was dust, then almost anybody and everybody would have asthma potentially.
Mm.
Um, but sometimes it's dust mites, which are the tiny insects that can hide and live in dust. And then I think it's usually a certain category of the dust has to be tiny enough to be inhaled and to actually get into the lungs.
Okay.
So
So
which is
fine
why
dust particles.
very fine,
Okay.
exactly. That's why they call it particulate matter. Is it's you almost can't see it with the naked eye actually.
Oh wait, hold on, and then mites now live inside that dust. That's how tiny they. Okay,
That's not
understood.
tiny there.
Understood.
Anyway, so the trick really is to find out what the person's allergens are and then to avoid them. So you need to keep the person's room well ventilated, free of dust and free of cockroaches. Keep your homes and your places of work and living free of cockroaches, free of rats, um, free of other animals that the person may react to.
Mm.
And then there are also other triggers that are not necessarily allergic, but you do need to watch the effects that it could have on the person. You could have emotional triggers. So if somebody is emotionally, yeah, I've
How
seen.
do emotions affect your lungs?
So what happens? So because the lungs basically they're the organ of breathing, and emotions do affect your breathing. So I've actually experienced it once, and this was even before I became a doctor. No, not experienced it, rather, I've observed it once. And what I saw was that the person, to try and explain in simple terms, the person got more and more upset and then started to cry. And so once she was agitated enough to start crying, um, she was really crying, so it started to affect her breathing. Because you think of someone that's crying and that's sobbing, you're not
Mm.
taking in air like you
Yeah, you're
should.
hyperventilating.
Yeah, thank you. You're hyperventilating. Then the mechanism then starts, which is those tiny muscles around the bronchioles then begin to tighten. The whole thing starts
Oh.
again. But it's usually in those that already have
Okay.
asthma. So avoid emotional triggers for those that have emotional triggers. Avoid the triggers that have those that have allergens, exposed to dust, dust mites, cockroach pots, rats. Avoid, don't
Mm-hmm.
have like generators like breathing right into the compound. You get
Mm.
like the exhaust fume should be elsewhere. Occupational health and safety for those that work in manufacturing areas that have a lot of certain kinds of machines that do bring out a lot of particulate matter, those should be avoided. They should wear face masks and all that sort of thing.
Mm.
So basically you modify your exposure to allergens based on your life and your lifestyle, and avoid as much as possible. The next most important thing is to know what the person's symptoms are. Because there are four key symptoms that usually occur: the coughing, like we mentioned, the
Mm-hmm.
difficulty in breathing,
Okay.
with the wheezing.
Mm-hmm. So
The
the difficulty in breathing will come across as wheezing.
Most times, but not always.
Okay.
So wheezing, so sometimes you would hear it, you
Mm-hmm.
and I would hear it without using a stethoscope.
Mm-hmm.
But most times it's more of a clinical perspective when the doctor sees you or when a health professional sees you and they use their stethoscope to listen to the chest,
Uh-huh.
they would hear the wheezing. So what then happens is that you could have somebody with you that's having an attack. You may not hear the wheezing. You could see the difficulty in breathing. The person's breathing
Mm-hmm.
fast or trying to get in air. You may not hear the wheezing, but when we get to the hospital, the doctor may listen with a stethoscope and would actually hear the wheezing. Sometimes you hear it without. So sometimes it's so loud you hear it without as a
Okay.
lay person.
Okay.
Other times it's not that loud, but the doctor will pick it up on their stethoscope.
Okay, we're gonna need more symptoms so that if we don't hear the wheezing, we can.
Yes, definitely. So let me bring out as a whole long list. I didn't want to miss out um on the many symptoms.
Mm. All right. So coughing, wheezing that you may or may not hear, but a
Yes.
doctor with a stethoscope definitely will.
Yes.
Mm.
Great. Shortness of breath, meaning that you can see the person is trying to breathe. So like if we use the movie analogy again, the whole part of the stereotype is when the person grabs a brown bag and is
And
breathing
then,
in. Yes.
mm-hmm.
Because they feel like they're breathing in, but the air isn't getting in there. So the shortness of breath, which is they're trying to get the air in. Then fast breathing, because remember they're trying to get the air in, they feel like they're not getting it in, so they're breathing in fast to try and make that process better. Difficulty talking.
Okay.
So as most people take it for granted, but your breathing is tightly intertwined
linked
with the
with
way
your
you
talking.
speak. Exactly. So the more effort you're putting into breathing, the less talking you can do.
Right.
A look of anxiety or distress, because imagine this person we're discussing already, the person is coughing, isn't getting the air in, the person would look anxious, maybe getting visibly upset. Then we also talk about nostrils flaring. This is by this time it's already getting more severe, right? The
Mm.
person is going into having what we call an asthmatic attack, which is where you can see a lot of these symptoms. So the nostrils are flaring, they're opening up a lot
Trying to get
more,
more
trying to get
air
in
in.
more air,
Okay.
exactly. And then if especially in a child, if the person is shirtless, or you happen to have a view of the chest. Sorry, Shakwa.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Or you have a view of the chest, you would even see the ribs, you'd see the rib cage, because there's so much. So you'd see the chest heaving and the person trying to breathe in, and you could actually see the rib cage as the person is trying to
Oh
get air
wow.
in. Yeah,
Oh
it
wow.
can
We
be
got
really
a
bad.
couple of messages. This first one is from Oluche Olanio up on YouTube, who
Oh,
says,
nice.
so good that you could get Dr. Anu back. I really enjoyed the malaria conversation.
Thank you so much. We enjoyed it too,
And
kinda.
yes, yes, yes. And Wale up on WhatsApp says, I had late onset asthma at the age of 40 and it has not been funny. Once I'm anxious, the attack occurs. You don't even know when the attack comes, especially at night or when I'm locked up in a lift. Oh my goodness. Okay, so that means
Mm,
you must be anxious in lifts as
mm,
well. Okay.
yeah.
Mm.
So maybe a bit claustrophobic,
Mm.
Wale, so maybe you should avoid. And it's really
But then
sad.
again, can a person with asthma who's claustrophobic avoid lifts when they will have to take the stairs? Wouldn't that work there? I mean, just putting it out there,
Yeah,
it feels like a
you make modifications.
Sophie's choice kind of thing.
Yeah, so that sort of thing, you'd make modifications. Maybe you would take short rides.
Mm.
So instead of taking the lift all the way to the sixth floor, maybe take to the second floor first, take a break, then go back in. That sort
All
of
right.
thing.
Well, how
But
does that sound?
yeah, I hope that helps. And it's really sad that late onset as
Mm.
it's a lot of people are bewildered because they're like, I didn't get this as a child, I didn't get this in my 20s or as a teenager. All of a
Is
sudden,
there a reason that it can occur because that
there's
it just
no
comes out of nowhere?
kinda. There's no particular reason. So there are a few factors. One of the factors is that for those that react to allergens, the longer you're exposed to allergens, the higher the possibility of reacting to them. So you may have missed. So let's say you have somebody that you have two people,
Mm.
and both are. Well, we start studying them at the age of 2 up until the age of 40, and they live in the same city, exposed to the same allergens. You could have one that has childhood onset asthma, and I could have the second person just because the person has been exposed to all the particulate matter that we talk about and the smoke over the past 38 years. At
Mm.
the age of 40 would then develop.
Oh wow.
Yes. Then a major thing is also hereditary in terms of familial history of asthma or of allergic conditions.
Mm.
So if you have somebody in your family who's already asthmatic, there's a higher risk of people in that family developing asthma.
Okay.
And there's a new body of research that is just starting, led by our dear non-friend COVID. There's
Ah.
also an impact by
Okay.
COVID that
Mm-hmm.
nobody. So in
Because
terms
people have
of
been talking about the effects of long COVID, right?
yes, and
And
there's an effect of long COVID on the lungs too, and for those who had previously existing conditions such as asthma and the COPD we talked about. So because COVID
wow.
is recent,
Mm.
there's no body of research to show yet, but there are definitely higher spikes of complaints and
Mm.
of worsened asthmatic attacks and conditions and health-seeking behavior from those that have asthma or those that have asthma and also had COVID or were exposed to COVID. So that one time will tell, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be a very good story.
All right. Now, we don't really have we have only a couple of minutes left,
Mm.
so I know I had many questions that I threw your way, but is there anything that we haven't spoken about that you might want to just put out there for the final couple of minutes and get that
Yeah.
information out?
Okay, yes, I would think in terms of awareness, I think it's very important to be aware of the the potential of people getting asthma. In terms of children that have asthma or are predisposed to allergens, it's important for their caregivers to have the entire ecosystem aware. So parents should be aware of what the asthma plan is. The asthma plan should be to avoid triggers, to know what medication to use where there are triggers, and everybody should be aware. The nanny, the cook, the driver, the teachers, wherever the child is going to be should be aware. They should have their inhalers available at all times. Don't scrimp on it, replace it, because
So
inhalers,
do inhalers expire?
yeah, like all drugs, because inhalers contain drugs. They're drugs. It's just that they're inhaled drugs because they're going straight into the lungs.
Okay.
Yeah. So very important, always have your inhalers on hand. Make sure the child knows how to use inhaler, and then also make sure that they get their regular checkups when they should.
Okay. And final thing now, I've just realized I need to ask this one.
Yeah.
When it comes to a medication, all I know about asthma is inhalers.
Yeah.
Is there any other what other kinds of medication should I ask?
Yeah.
Out
So
there?
oh yeah, definitely. So they're inhalers. So and inhalers contain drugs, just that they're propellant drugs. So the person inhales them, right? And then they're also, and inhalers contain a certain type of drug, which are to stop those symptoms there and then. Then there are also tablets and also injections that contain corticosteroids, commonly known as steroids, and other type of medication that are more long term. So yeah, so those.
So inhalers are basically like
You must have it.
emergency intervention.
Yes.
And then the others are
more they act over the long term.
okay.
So you have people who are on those drugs and are using them over, a long period of time, and are supposed to continue using them whether or not they see their symptoms.
Okay.
Because that's the only way it
So
has
that
its
would
effect.
actually suppress
Yes.
the symptoms.
The reaction, exactly.
Gotcha. All right. So we've actually run out of time, but we will always have time for questions like this. This message comes in. This lady says, "Please, how do I manage late onset of asthma? I'm age 40 and I'm pregnant."
Oh wow, asthma in pregnancy. Really sorry to hear that you have that. It must be emotionally and physically tasking. You would need to see your specialist. So your obs and gynae would manage the pregnancy, but would ideally do that in conjunction with a respiratory doctor, right? Because they would have to be careful of the sort of medication that they put you on because of the pregnancy. I think in your case too, you would have to work hand in hand with your medical doctors, because you'd have to watch and see what your triggers are, because you would have to avoid them. Most of your management most likely would be lifestyle. But the medication that you'll be prescribed must be by specialists. So make sure you see specialists, both an obs and gynae and a pulmonary doctor, so that they can determine which medication, if you need medication during the pregnancy, because it has to be medication that is safe for your unborn child.
Dr. Anu, we've come to the end of the show. I don't want to let you go. It is always such a blast having you here, because you know what? It's one thing to give information, but it's one thing to give information that we can swallow. Along the lines of feeding the chickens the feed as opposed to throwing it at their heads.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So thank you so much for coming in once again on Smooth Health, and for breaking down a topic into these manageable chunks that we can digest and go ahead and just incorporate into our lives. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. Thank you so much.
All right, so that was Dr. Anu Martins, who's a health management consultant. We're trying to get her on social media. I'm putting her out there on air. We're trying to get her on social media, but she is currently up on YouTube. There's a focus on her right now on the YouTube live, courtesy of Juliet. You can replay this on youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos, and I will try to get Dr. Anu back into the studio again. I'm just putting all of this on air so that people will have a record. But I'll definitely try to get her back into the studio.
No pressure.
No pressure whatsoever.
Thank you so much, Shakwa.
Thank you. But that's that for Smooth Health. I've got great music for you. On the other side is Sterling Sims with I Love You.
Hey.
Thank you.